Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. The book we're interpreting in this issue is the timeless classic of British literature, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us, we were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period, that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. If someone were to write a book dedicated to the classic openings of British novels, Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities would undoubtedly be included. This historical novel, set against the backdrop of the French Revolution, garnered the love of a wide readership as soon as it was published. For over 150 years, it has been constantly read, discussed, and even misunderstood. Meanwhile, the style of the work and the historical perspective it reveals have sparked numerous controversies in the cultural world. Only in recent years has it truly received fair evaluation. It can be said that among all of Charles Dickens' literary masterpieces, the opinions of ordinary readers and scholars differ most when it comes to A Tale of Two Cities. Some say it firmly grasps the imagination of the public, while others argue that its story is not as perfect or well-researched as Our Mutual Friend and Great Expectations. Some find its structure unbalanced, while others value its straightforward and concise power that permeates the entire book. So, where does the captivating charm of A Tale of Two Cities come from? Why do some consider it the best of Dickens while others see it as the worst? Are the scenes depicting the French Revolution in the novel believable? After the book's publication, what kind of praise and criticism did the author and his work receive? To answer this series of questions, it's necessary to first have a brief understanding of the author himself, the background of this work's creation, and the plot of the story. Charles Dickens was born in 1812 in the outskirts of Portsmouth, at a time when the 19th century was just transitioning from an agricultural society to an industrial one in Britain. His father, John, was a minor clerk in the Navy Pay Office, earning an average income and struggling to support his family of 8 children, often in debt. When Charles was 10, his father was imprisoned due to debts, and he had to become an apprentice in a shoemaker's factory owned by distant relatives, working 6 days a week in a cold, damp basement. This experience left a profound impression on young Dickens and directly influenced his future literary career. After his father's release from prison, Dickens was able to continue his education, but the good times didn't last long. Soon, he had to enter the workforce to support himself because he couldn't afford school fees. At the age of 18, Dickens fell in love with a banker's daughter, but in the end, his beloved married a wealthy businessman. Early exposure to the complexities of human relationships, coupled with the torment of a teenage heartbreak, provided Dickens with a wealth of material for his writing. In 1833, he began writing short essays for newspapers under the pseudonym Boz, and these essays were later compiled into his first work, Sketches by Boz. His subsequent work, The Pickwick Papers, made Dickens a household name, and by 1842, in his early 30s, he was already a highly regarded author in the British literary world, with each of his works becoming immensely popular on both sides of the Atlantic. Dickens loved to travel, and during his stay in Paris in 1846, he received a warm welcome from the French literary giant Victor Hugo. This experience made him even more proficient in writing A Tale of Two Cities. Throughout his life, Dickens wrote 16 full-length novels, as well as numerous short stories and other works. In A Tale of Two Cities, the two cities refer to London and Paris, more precisely, the story of joy and sorrow, separation and reunion, that unfolds in these two cities during the tumultuous period of the French Revolution. England and France are separated only by the English Channel, and from the Middle Ages, the two nations have had deep and intricate connections in politics, economics, culture, and more. Charles Dickens wrote A Tale of Two Cities with the aim of capturing the atmosphere of that particular historical era and conveying his message within a limited narrative space, The sharp class divides in society inevitably lead to conflict, but bloodshed only begets more bloodshed. The cycle of revenge must be broken, and salvation can only come through compassion and kindness. Like most of the middle-class intellectuals of his time, Dickens saw the origins and complexities of the Revolution, but could not wholeheartedly support violent class struggles. Instead, he advocated for relatively moderate social reforms. In A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens spares no effort in depicting the suffering of the lower classes, sharply criticizing social injustice and various societal ills. He aimed to remind people to confront reality, preempt the escalation of social conflicts, and avoid the day when oppressed people can bear no more and rise up in rebellion, leading to the complete upheaval of society. Among Dickens's lengthy novels, A Tale of Two Cities is relatively short, and the plot is comparatively simple. The author does not waste much ink on explaining the historical context and societal conditions, and his descriptions of many scenes are concise. However, the central conflict of the story is intense, with well-paced development, ensuring that it consistently holds the reader's attention. The primary character in the novel is Dr. Manette, whose experiences before and after the Revolution formed the main storyline. Dr. Manette was originally a renowned French physician, known for his integrity and medical skills, which provided him a respectable position to earn his livelihood. However, within the context of the pre-revolutionary feudal class system in France, his social status did not significantly differ from that of the laboring masses. One day, while on a walk, he is forced by the Evrémonde brothers, the Marquis and his brother, to provide medical care to two patients. At the Marquis estate, he encounters a gravely injured young man and a dying peasant woman. It turns out that the aristocratic brothers had mistreated the beautiful woman and killed the woman's husband and father. The woman's brother was determined to avenge his sister but was severely injured due to the overwhelming power of the Marquis household. These acts of oppression and callousness by the aristocratic brothers deeply infuriate Dr. Manette. As a witness, he rejects the bribes offered by the aristocrats and attempts to seek justice for the suffering common people. However, it is predictable that the noble brothers wield great influence and manipulate events to have Dr. Manette unjustly imprisoned in the Bastille, where he endures 18 years of hardship. 2 years into his imprisonment, Dr. Manette's wife dies, and their young daughter is taken in by a kind-hearted servant and raised in London. In the novel, Dr. Manette is first seen in the year 1775, when he is finally released from prison, and after his release, he resides temporarily in the hotel run by his former servant, Mr. Lorry. Dr. Manette's daughter, Lucy Manette, has grown into adulthood and travels to Paris to bring her newly released father to London. Despite his release, Dr. Manette, who had been imprisoned in the darkest of places for many years, resembles a living corpse. His health is extremely poor, and he is half mad, almost unable to remember his own name or respond to others. He often remains silent when spoken to, mechanically working on making shoes, and has lost almost all basic human emotions. On their journey home, they encounter a man named Charles Darnay, who takes a keen interest in their welfare. It is at this moment that the golden rule of coincidence begins to come into play. Gradually, readers discover that Darnay is not just a random passerby. His two uncles are the same oppressive Evrémonde brothers mentioned earlier. Although Darnay came from the aristocracy, he was deeply influenced by the Enlightenment ideas of 18th century France, and was unwilling to continue to associate with his own class, choosing instead to become a teacher in London. However, at this time, both England and France seemed to be sitting on a powder keg, with the lives of ordinary people being swept into various revolutionary whirlwinds. Darnay is falsely accused of being a French spy by 2 British spies and faces the death penalty. Lucy appears in court as a witness to testify to his innocence. Fortunately, Darnay's lawyer has an assistant named Sidney Carton, who bears a striking resemblance to Darnay, and the lawyer argues that the accusers could have easily mistaken one for the other. It's worth noting that Dickens had an extensive knowledge of legal affairs and had been involved in lengthy copyright lawsuits. Many of his novels contain detailed courtroom scenes, and many of his important characters have legal backgrounds. To some extent, Dickens was also a pioneer in legal fiction. Returning to the story, this courtroom drama not only successfully saves Darnay, but also brings another important character into our view. We must remember the name Carton, as he will have his moment to shine later on. Through their interactions with the father-daughter duo, Darnay falls in love with Lucy. Even after learning that Darnay is the nephew of his enemies, the Evermond brothers, Dr. Manette forgives him and approves of their marriage. While Dr. Manette and his daughter settle down in London and he gradually regains his memory, the wasted years of his life in prison still haunt him, often appearing in his dreams. Shifting the focus to France, we see that the Marquis Evermond, Darnay's uncle, continues his oppressive ways, recklessly driving his carriage on the road and killing a peasant child. In a fit of anger, the child's father draws his knife and takes the Marquis' life, a fate well deserved. However, his death marks the beginning rather than the end of the story. Tensions between the nobility and the common people continue to escalate, and the hotel run by Mr. and Mrs. Defarge, Dr. Manette's former servants, becomes a meeting point for revolutionary activists. A revolution is brewing beneath the surface. Mrs. Defarge and her family have a deep-seated hatred for the Evermond family, as they were responsible for the deaths of her family members and are determined to make them suffer. Smart readers can already predict that Darnay's fate is in danger at this point. At the same time, the undercurrents of love maintain a pace just as turbulent as the revolutionary wave. Like Darnay, Carton also falls in love with the beautiful Lucy. However, upon learning of Lucy's choice, Carton unselfishly abandons his pursuit, sacrificing himself for true love. Time quickly advances to 1789, a year forever etched in European history. The French Revolution erupts. The masses storm the Bastille, bringing the aristocrats from their opulent mansions to the guillotine. In the midst of the fervent revolutionary atmosphere, Darnay is arrested by the revolutionary activists in an attempt to return to England to save an ailing servant. Dr. Manette, after revealing his tragic past and Darnay's compassionate care, wins over the crowd, and Darnay's life is temporarily spared. However, Mrs. Defarge, utilizing a record of Dr. Manette's accusations hidden in the prison, denounces Darnay and declares him to be the last surviving member of the thoroughly corrupt Evermond family, intent on putting him to death. Consequently, Dr. Manette is unable to defend his son-in-law. In a critical moment, and just as Darnay is about to face the guillotine, Sidney Carton, who deeply loves Lucy just as Darnay does, steps forward. He exploits his striking resemblance to Darnay, and uses his connections to take Darnay's place in facing execution. In this noble and selfless act, he foils Mrs. Defarge's vengeful plan, allowing Dr. Manette's family to escape Paris safely. Carton, in a spirit of self-sacrifice, walks calmly to the guillotine in place of Darnay. Charles Dickens' humanitarian stance in A Tale of Two Cities is most prominently reflected in the character of Sidney Carton. At first glance, Carton may not appear to be a great hero or a champion. In real life, he is well educated but shabby, prone to alcohol, and lacks personal grooming. However, it's this down-and-out intellectual who becomes a hero at a crucial moment, sacrificing his precious life to rescue Darnay and fulfill true love. This represents the highest ideal of the pure and noble soul that resides deep within Carton, as well as Dickens' own highest ideal and the ideal of the reformist intellectuals he represents. This ideal emphasizes the purification of the impure with love, tolerance, and selflessness, conquering hatred and ultimately achieving harmony in society. Indeed, A Tale of Two Cities begins with a dark and oppressive atmosphere, culminating in a perfect and legendary ending. It features a heroine who is angelically kind, two ruthless aristocratic oppressors, and a female antagonist who is wicked to the core. However, these elements alone cannot explain the enduring power of this work in the hearts of readers. Why is it that millions of readers, even those unfamiliar with Dickens, find it impossible to put down A Tale of Two Cities? The magic of this novel lies in its ingenious approach. Dickens condenses the multitude of significant historical events into the transformation of one family. As a result, readers do not encounter a series of abstract or hollow descriptions when trying to understand and feel the impact of the French Revolution. Instead, they vividly witness how a public event that sweeps through everything savagely encroaches on private family life, thanks to Dickens' vivid and artful prose. Dickens was acutely aware that revolution was inevitable, deeply rooted in the long-standing social injustices that fueled class resentment. He understood that any radical social change is complex, and that every life involuntarily caught in the whirlwind of revolution holds equal value. The notion of the best of times and the worst of times embodies Dickens' dialectical understanding of society. In his view, beyond all factions and positions, there shines the brilliance of humanity and compassion, self-sacrifice for the purification of the impure, and the overcoming of hatred, ultimately leading to the harmonious coexistence of an entire society. As an Englishman, how did Dickens come up with the idea to write a novel about the French Revolution? During the writing process, what materials did he use, and what works did he draw inspiration from? Did anyone else provide guidance in the background? What are the unique aspects of this novel? Let's continue listening, and the mysteries will be revealed one by one. A Tale of Two Cities was published in 1859 and belongs to the middle and later period of Dickens' literary career. Although in the preface, he mentions that the idea for this work came from a play he participated in with relatives and friends in 1857, called The Frozen Deep, most people believe that Thomas Carlyle's book The French Revolution was the most direct source of inspiration for A Tale of Two Cities. So, who is this Thomas Carlyle, and what kind of work is the French Revolution? A brief introduction is necessary here. Thomas Carlyle was a renowned British thinker, historian, writer, social activist, and political reformer in British history. He was well known for his profound ideas, majestic writing, and eloquence, earning great prestige in the mid-19th century. The French Revolution is his most famous work and is considered the highest standard of British scholarly research on the French Revolution. In 1840, at a lecture, the rising star of the literary world, Dickens, first met Carlyle and was deeply moved by his eloquent speech. From then on, the French Revolution became his constant companion. When it was rumored that Dickens intended to write a novel about the French Revolution, Carlyle generously provided him with 2 cartloads of books for reference. So when reading A Tale of Two Cities, Carlyle and the French Revolution are authors and works that cannot be ignored. Dickens not only drew to a considerable extent from Carlyle's historical perspective in the French Revolution, but also emulated the distinguished literary giant in his choice of words and sentences. Under Dickens' pen, this unprecedentedly large-scale revolution is often metaphorically likened to an earthquake and flood, similar to the expressions Carlyle frequently employed. The intertwined and mutually harmful history of the Manette family and the Evrémonde family runs throughout A Tale of Two Cities. Interwoven within these narratives are vivid recreations of the original scenes that record significant moments while creating an atmosphere for readers, sometimes mysterious, explosive, or tranquil. For instance, the book describes the revolution with phrases like, amid an unusual concourse of the populace, in all and each of which it was a foul, misshapen, noisy, bloody, and horrible scene. The bourgeois revolution in late 18th century France was unprecedented in scale and had far-reaching effects that extended beyond the borders of France, setting off a storm that swept through Europe and the world. On the surface, the Grand Revolution employed violent means, aiming directly at the king, and the privileges of the aristocracy and religion faced continuous assaults from liberal political organizations and protesting masses, leading to the gradual replacement of old ideas by concepts like natural rights and separation of powers. Within 3 short years, the Bourbon monarchy that had ruled France for many years completely collapsed. However, the French Revolution is a complex historical phenomenon, full of contradictions and entanglements. Different interest groups, each representing their interests, jostled and competed in this grand affair. As Lord Acton, a history professor at the University of Cambridge, said, the French Revolution was not a meteor from an unknown sphere but the product of all the forces of our history. Whether it was the revolutionaries who dreamed of establishing a new order amid the tumultuous waves or the aristocratic class that lived their lives in decline and excess, both sides had their ugly aspects, and at certain moments, their humanity shone through. In the face of such historical complexity, Carlyle did not oversimplify it in the French Revolution but based on the specific historical context at the time, combined with a moderate degree of imagination, he outlined vivid character profiles. As a devoted follower of Carlyle, Dickens naturally refrained from using one-dimensional, lifeless puppets to replace flesh-and-blood characters in A Tale of Two Cities. Dickens employed two typical writing techniques, both of which were used to great effect in A Tale of Two Cities, significantly enhancing the novel's readability and emotional impact. The first technique is the clever use of repetition, where softly repeating sentences resonate like a chant in just the right places. Readers do not find this repetition lengthy or tedious. Instead, it becomes more flavorful with each repetition. The second technique is creating naturally occurring dramatic conflicts. However, the dramatic conflicts in Dickens' work are far from the melodrama found in soap operas. Through the example provided below, one can observe Dickens' mastery of this aspect. Shortly after the opening of A Tale of Two Cities, in the chapter titled The Wine Shop, a large cask of wine is accidentally broken, spilling its contents onto the ground. Nearby men and women fall to their knees and drink from the ground. This scene foreshadows the later scenes of bloody carnage, conveying an irreparable sense of destiny. In addition to these two writing techniques, A Tale of Two Cities possesses another characteristic, an intricate and exhaustive portrayal of themes that are both opposing and unifying. What are these opposing yet unifying themes in the work? In simple terms, one is the inner freedom experienced when the body is physically imprisoned, and the other is the superficial freedom concealed beneath apparent restraint. In this novel, the source of all contradictions lies in human memory. For instance, Carton, at one point, confines himself to a moral graveyard, leading a life like the walking dead. It's only when he decides to selflessly save others and embrace death that he earns the right to truly anticipate eternal life. This dialectical relationship exists in many places in the novel, such as between Madame Defarge and Lucy Minette. Any perceptive reader can immediately recognize that they are the most direct opposing characters, with one representing purity and the other representing ugliness and cruelty. These interwoven, conflicting, and overlapping images are woven into the novel but remain orderly, never acting in isolation. They don't affect the smoothness of the narrative but rather function like a skillfully coordinated symphony orchestra. Like many of Dickens' other novels, A Tale of Two Cities was initially serialized in publications. In April 1859, Charles Dickens' literary magazine, All the Year Round, was established, and this marked the beginning of the serialization of A Tale of Two Cities. When the novel was officially published, Dickens was 47 years old, and his life had just reached a turning point. A year earlier, he had separated from his wife of many years due to rumors of an affair with an actress named Ellen Ternan. Dickens faced public scrutiny and harsh criticism, prompting him to issue an official statement vehemently denying any improper relationship with the actress. However, he had, in fact, lied, which caused quite a controversy. The turning point in his personal life seemed to coincide with a change in his writing style, reflecting the intense emotions he was experiencing in his own life in A Tale of Two Cities. In this novel, Dickens no longer focused on financiers, minor bureaucrats, politicians, and lawyers but extended his imagination to the revolutionary storm that shook Europe in the late 18th century. A Tale of Two Cities had no shortage of readers, both during the initial serialization and after its publication. However, it's intriguing that critical reception of the work was highly divisive. Some praised it extensively, while others criticized it for not being humorous enough, a rather humorous critique in itself given Dickens' reputation for humor. Examining these diverse viewpoints is not only fascinating but can also provide insight into the novel. One of the earliest criticisms of A Tale of Two Cities appeared in an anonymous review published in The Observer on December 11, 1859. The review suggested that Dickens had been deluding himself to believe that he could provide the public with a better understanding of the French Revolution through his novel. The critique argued that his source material, The French Revolution by Carlyle, was not as reliable as people believed, and that Carlyle's account was not as accurate as Dickens had assumed. This critique might sound rather pointed. However, after reading the following commentary, you'll likely find that this critique was quite mild. James Fitzjames Stephen, who wrote the most vehement critique of A Tale of Two Cities, happened to be the uncle of Virginia Woolf, a famous proponent of stream of consciousness writing. Returning to the point, Stevens' article included remarks stating that Dickens had effectively demonized the ancestors of both the British and the French, portraying them as cruel, savage, and paranoid people who had no regard for justice or morality. The article argued that the British portrayal in the novel was grossly inaccurate, asserting that while Britain had its problems at the time, it was not the way Dickens depicted it. The article further compared Dickens unfavorably to another British novelist, Walter Scott. It claimed that Scott's works might be like stewed mutton, underdone beef, or tough fowl, but they were at least edible, whereas Dickens' novels were like eating cat meat, making them nearly impossible to swallow. In the article's view, the actions of the fictional character Charles Darnay, the Evrémonde, were exaggerated, and no matter how incompetent and decadent the French aristocracy might have been, they could not have persecuted people without scruples to the extent Dickens portrayed. With the criticisms from the opposing camp addressed, let's now explore some of the positive reviews of Dickens' work. In his biography of Dickens published shortly after the author's death, his close friend John Forster wrote, "Charles Dickens' greatest strength lies in his ability to craft characters. In each of his novels, one can find evidence of his unparalleled storytelling skills. However, when depicting the impact of a sweeping public event on certain families' private lives, he displays an unmatched level of expertise." G.K. Chesterton, another prominent British writer, was known for his extensive essays. He wrote an introduction to A Tale of Two Cities, which is particularly interesting and worth discussing here. He compared Dickens to Carlyle, noting that although Carlyle had read many books about the French Revolution, Dickens had only read Carlyle's book. Surprisingly, Chesterton believed that Dickens was more accurate than Carlyle in his portrayal of the French Revolution. This may sound contradictory, but Chesterton provided his reasoning. He thought that Carlyle's mind was cluttered with too many things, which prevented him from seeing the causes and consequences of the French Revolution clearly. On the other hand, Dickens, being a true Londoner who thought that London was the center of the universe, was unaware that Paris was the capital of Europe and certainly didn't know that all roads lead to Rome. This ignorance, according to Chesterton, allowed Dickens to offer a unique, outsider's perspective. When Dickens wrote this novel, he aimed to make breakthroughs in both subject matter and style. A Tale of Two Cities has been in publication for over a century and a half, and its depth of thought and literary value have been widely acknowledged. Dickens indeed realized his ideas very effectively. In the novel's conclusion, as the radiant true protagonist Carton generously goes to his death, the prayers of a Christian funeral repeatedly echo in his mind. Resurrection and eternal life, perhaps, are the ultimate themes of A Tale of Two Cities. In the reflection of Carton, everything and everyone else appears mundane and dull. Whether through symbolism, psychoanalysis, the fusion of realism and romanticism, a meticulously crafted plot structure, or a concise yet deeply resonant writing style, Dickens is undoubtedly worthy of his reputation as one of the greatest novelists in English literary history. And A Tale of Two Cities, as his magnum opus, will continue to move readers for generations. So, in this discussion, let's recap the key points. 1. A Tale of Two Cities is a masterpiece by the renowned English novelist Charles Dickens. Over 150 years since its publication, it has garnered immense love from countless readers and is considered one of the greatest works set against the backdrop of the French Revolution. 2. Thomas Carlyle's The French Revolution serves as the most direct source of inspiration for A Tale of Two Cities. When reading the novel, Carlyle and his work are essential authors and texts to consider. 3. The late 18th century French bourgeois revolution was of an unprecedented scale, causing a storm that swept across Europe and the world. The French Revolution is, in fact, a complex historical phenomenon filled with contradictions and entanglements among different interest groups, where both sides had their unsightly aspects and occasional flashes of human brilliance. 4. Dickens had two typical writing techniques: the artful use of repetition and the creation of well-placed dramatic conflicts. His adept use of these techniques contributed to the novel's literary quality and readability. 5. A Tale of Two Cities features another distinctive characteristic: the skillful portrayal of themes that are both contrasting and unified. This dialectical feature adds depth to character development and profound thematic exploration in the novel. 6. The novel has been the subject of considerable controversy in the world of literary criticism. Opinions from both sides of the spectrum are intriguing and aid in better understanding the work. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.